Welcome, teacher friend. I'm Lori.
And I'm Melissa.
We are two literacy educators in Baltimore. We want the best for all kids, and we know you do too.
Our district recently adopted a new literacy curriculum, which meant a lot of change for everyone. Lori and I can't wait to keep learning about literacy with you today. Hi, Lori.
Hi, Melissa.
How are you today?
I am awesome. We don't have to let anybody know, except for all of our listeners, that we've already recorded this podcast. We just...
Take two.
Take two. You guys, we recorded it, and it wasn't recording.
Yeah, so we're going to do it again.
I don't think we're the first podcasters.
Second time around.
I don't think we're the first podcasters to do that either.
Nope.
I kept looking at it. I was like, it is not recording. But then I thought, maybe I don't understand GarageBand that well.
This time it is.
All right, we got it, y'all.
So today we're going to be talking about a couple of articles. One came across pretty recently, just in May, an article from Natalie Wexler, and it's called The Biggest Education News Story You've Never Heard of. And it really caught my eye because I think there was like a journalism conference of some sort here, education journalism conference here in Baltimore. And so in the article, it actually talks about our CEO, Sonia Santelises, and she's talking about this idea of knowledge building, which is what we've been talking about too.
Yes, with the Wit Wisdom curriculum, that is building knowledge and vocabulary. That is their main focus.
Yeah, so very exciting.
Yes. And so, Natalie Wexler, we really do love you, and we're your big fan club.
Maybe stalkers.
So we're also going to highlight another article, because once we got into Natalie's article from this past May, 2019, we found another one that was published in The Atlantic, and it was from April of 2018, Why American Students Haven't Gotten Better at Reading in 20 Years. And we will put the links for all of these articles in the show's information. But the article that I'm going to be speaking about is sharing that schools usually focus on teaching comprehension skills instead of general knowledge, but education researchers know better. So essentially, right, why are we not doing what we know better about?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to mostly talk about this article. Melissa's going to talk about the other one. We'll talk together about both, but we'll be sharing information from both articles. And we thought it would be easier if we each had one article in front of us to provide text evidence for you all.
Yeah, and the one that I have here, again, it's written sort of to journalists or about journalists. And so it says that, journalists might not be aware of this idea of, people think we need to focus on reading skills, but in actuality, it's the knowledge that is the important thing. I would technically argue that it's not just journalists.
Yeah, that's right.
That I think even, our CEO coming out and saying that, we have this new curriculum, we're moving this direction is slightly radical in terms of education right now. It's not something that is really... I don't know, common in the literacy world right now, but becoming more common.
And it should be, because it's Shift 3.
Yes, right. But I feel like this shift is finally happening.
It's finally hitting. Yes, we finally got to Shift 3.
Yeah.
So you can listen to our other podcast all about Shift 3.
Yes.
And we interview Sarah Woodard from Wit Wisdom. It's an amazing resource if you're looking to get more information about building background knowledge and vocabulary and why all of this is so important and the impact of Shift 3, not only on the Wit and Wisdom curriculum, but just general information, learning more about it, going a bit deeper into it. But yeah, it's something that we're kind of coming into our own about right now.
Yeah, just starting to. And I think there's a quote here. I won't read the whole quote, but I think that I'll give the gist of it. Yeah. The idea is that, when we look at these tests, right, the standardized tests, it looks like what students are being assessed on is things like finding the main idea, making inferences, those skills, when in fact it has little to do with those skills. A little bit it does, right? But it mostly has to do with the passage, right? And the passage that's there is what really matters. And, the vocabulary, the content, and what students know about it coming into reading that and how they interact with it, how they comprehend it, all of that goes into it, which is hugely complex, is so much more important than just, okay, I taught them main idea one day, so that means that they should be able to apply that to whatever text I put in front of them.
Yeah. I mean, in the first year of teaching, I was doing the main idea and details Sunday. And then we were learning main idea in isolation. It was very skill-driven, followed by I don't want to say low-level application, but it was very fabricated.
Yeah.
This fabricated application of main idea and details to a text that clearly was from a workbook that lent itself to main idea and details. And to be perfectly honest, my students could not apply that to a complex text that we were reading in class, right? They couldn't apply that to Talk Everlasting. I mean, that's a bad example because it's main idea and details, but they couldn't apply it to a text we were reading in class. Let's put it that way. Because it wasn't something that was useful for them. They weren't applying in the moment and using the text to drive their thinking.
Right.
So.
Right. And then there's one line here that I will read. She says, but it can be hard for teachers to absorb this message, especially when their job ratings and those of their schools are tied to test scores, which just makes so much sense, right?
Preach,
like,
Natalie. Preach, Natalie.
Right. If you're looking at that test and you're like, well, no, let's just break it down. What are they being tested on? Let's teach that. And that should be it. But it does not work that way for literacy. It doesn't work.
No. And I think we were talking before.
Which shows in your NAEP scores.
It shows in our NAEP scores. It does show in my NAEP scores. But it also shows in the way that people focus on, like, quote, teaching one standard, like reteaching a standard. Whereas, like, standards are not isolated incidents. It's like, I always share with teachers, I feel like, especially new teachers, I try and create visuals. It's like a tornado. Like, you need to know how to find the main idea of the text. You need to find the text evidence. So, right, you're hitting several standards. You need to be able to use the vocabulary. You need to be able to identify the author's purpose. And then all of that together creates your comprehension experience. So it's like a tornado of a handful of standards, if not more, right? Usually way more, all wound up to get you to a task.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that also makes me think of, not only like what does the instruction look like, but we talked a little bit, we're already talking about assessment, but that's kind of like their end of year test. But when we talk about assessment, like throughout, it brings me back to my first year of teaching. And, I just was being pushed to use data, track the data, see where they are, what am I doing with that data? And it never fully made sense to me because I just thought that, right, like, okay, well, they didn't get that main idea question right. Does that mean they really don't understand how to find a main idea? Or is it that text that they struggled with? And then what do you can't just reteach main idea in a different way. They might still struggle with it on that text because that text is difficult.
Yeah.
So it's a lot messier than just a quick reteach.
Absolutely.
Right? It's a lot messier than just looking at how many students scored well on this one question, right? But it's a matter of looking at the actual text itself, the vocabulary in that text, what your students know about whatever that text is about, and the skills that went into it.
The other text that they've read about topical knowledge about that text or about that subject as well.
Yep.
To be able to apply it.
Yeah. So it's all these puzzle pieces that go into it that you can't just simply look at the outcome and make decisions about it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I like that puzzle piece analogy. So it all comes together.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I always think like the most intimate experience that you can have and really get to know a kid as a reader is by experiencing it with them. So listening to them read, but then also having that discussion with them. And so I think that's where literacy and math are just so different. Obviously we know they are, but it just digs deeper when math can say like, okay, I know the skill of dividing fractions is really holding the student up down the line because they can't access this problem because they don't know how to divide fractions, right? They're supposed to have that skill. They can't do it. That's a roadblock for them. Whereas literacy, it's so driven by things that we can't touch or feel.
Yep.
Like I can't touch or feel what you know in your background knowledge in your brain about X, Y, or Z.
Yep.
And so it's really that conversation with the kid after they read the text. And it's more anecdotal, right? So you're jotting notes down, you're listening to your students, you're asking them targeted questions that will help you assess what they know.
Right.
And what they can do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's messy.
It's really messy. Well, we'll get into it in further podcasts
absolutely.
about what to do with assessments and data, but
for
now we'll leave it as it's messy.
Yes, I agree. And I don't want to leave the NAEP scores comment hanging, but NAEP refers to, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, in case you're wondering. And just FYI, that math scores have been flat since 2009, reading scores since 1998, with just a third or so of students performing at a level the NAEP defines as proficient. Performance gaps between lower income students and their more affluent peers, among other demographic discrepancies, have remained stubbornly wide. That is, we'll just leave it at that. That's so astounding. A third of the students performing at the level of proficient. So I guess, we are just thinking, why, if we know that general knowledge and knowledge build and vocabulary support comprehension better than teaching skills in isolation, why are we still doing it? Why, why are curriculums still being built, right? Like when you look at ed reports, curriculums are still being built, some on skills versus the knowledge build. And so if all of this research points to this, how can we shift our thinking as educators to be able to make this a reality?
That's a great question.
I love that
How
question.
How are we?
How are we doing that?
We are going to join forces with Natalie Wexler and somehow make this happen.
Well, she does have a book coming out, Melissa.
I know she does, and I'm so excited about her book.
Yes. So we are thinking of having a book club for our podcast listeners. And it's Natalie Wexler is coming out with a book in August of 2019. And it's called The Knowledge Gap, The Hidden Cause of America's Broken Education System and How to Fix It. So we were thinking it would be really awesome to read this book and then each week come to you with a very mini podcast and just debrief the book, debrief our thinking, and really get our hands on and our brain, try to wrap our brains around what she's saying about this topic.
Yeah, and I think, to your question of, how do we make this shift?
Yeah.
is, we don't fully understand it, and I think, we have spent the past year trying to understand it, and like you said, we're definitely light years from where we were to understand it from a year ago. But there's so much more. I want to read her book because I want to learn more about the, why and how we actually do this.
Yeah.
And so I think, we need to share that and get
Can
more
you
people.
Pre-order it? You have it pulled up.
I already pre-ordered it,
Oh,
Lori.
we can pre-order
I already
it.
pre-ordered it.
I'm going to pre-order it later.
Done and done.
What I think is cool about the book, though, is that it says it'll take readers inside schools and classrooms, and it will show them exactly what the skills-focused approach to literacy instruction looks like, which I think is important because, folks may not know that they're doing a skills-focused approach. Right. Until you kind of zoom out and you see the big picture, you might be like, wow, that's me. And how can I shift my instruction to be more equitable? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's no fault of any teachers, right? It's how I was taught to teach reading. I'm sure that's
how I was
how you were taught to teach reading. It is the common message of how we teach. So I think it's, it'll be really interesting to read her book and see what it looks like and identify ourselves in that and
I think
what
that's
we can shift.
That's why Wit Wisdom has been such an incredible experience this year, is because not only have we been able to be learners about essentially, right, about the knowledge and building knowledge and the building vocabulary, but also we've been able to see kids engaged in this process and just be believers. It just made me so much of a believer in Wit and Wisdom's curriculum structure, and then just everything about it makes so much sense, right? The arcs of learning, the focusing question tasks, how you prepare for teaching. I know we're going to talk about it all on different podcasts, but it really does speak to this, and every time I look at it, I feel like, hallelujah,
And I've heard from teachers and principals this year that, I think at first it was a huge, I don't want to keep using the word shift, but
left turn.
Yes, a huge left turn from where they were, and I think, took a lot of people by surprise about, the way that it changed, not doing that skills-based teaching, and I think some people probably still struggling with it, which is understandable.
Yeah.
But I think what I heard the teachers and principals saying is, over the course of the year, they started to see it working a little bit. And because it's not you know, you do this for a week and it's fixed, right? Like building knowledge of students is over time.
So much time.
And so even hearing that over 1 year, we're seeing like them starting to get it and bring their knowledge from one text to the next text to the next text, and it's making sense.
Yeah.
I can only imagine like over the next few years what that will mean for our students.
Oh my gosh. Right. I mean, think about our first grade babies who are getting this in first grade, and by the time they get to 8th grade, oh my gosh, it's just going to be incredible.
Yeah,
Their
I
growth,
agree.
and you know, I just think they're going to be so excited about learning, and they're going to have so much background knowledge in their backpack that they're just going to take it with them into high school and soar with it. They're going to have so much information that they will be so pumped to learn and continue to build their knowledge over time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
So the moral of the story is that we love Natalie Wexler. Please read her
Absolutely.
articles that we've highlighted today. Melissa, read that. You want to read that title again?
Yep, it is the biggest education news story you've never heard of.
And mine is Why American Students Haven't Gotten Better at Reading in 20 Years.
Yep, and you can pre-order her book. She is not giving us anything for selling her book right now on our
Nothing.
podcast. We just really want you to read it. But The Knowledge Gap, The Hidden Cause of America's Broken Education System and How to Fix It.
So we are going to start a book club. RSVP that book on Amazon, pre-order it. We are not getting anything from Amazon
Nothing.
either, but we would happily take it. We're both Prime members because we have children. But we are so thankful that you listened to us today, and please feel free to join our Facebook group, Melissa and Lori Love Literacy, as well as we are on Instagram, Melissa and Lori Love Literacy. So find us and connect with us, and we can't wait to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, can't wait to talk about this more. Bye, everybody.